my name is Rob Hube and I'm with alllearners.org. If you're listening to this, you probably want to improve yourself, grow and move forward. But to quote the philosopher George Santayana, to know your future, you must know your past. So, before we go forward, we are going to look back to the origin of education as we know it. Now, I definitely do not want to encourage you to forget our past or to stop doing what we've been doing successfully up until now. I want to encourage you to use it all. Informal learning is as old as mankind. But let's zoom into the formal ways of learning. Around 3000 BC in the ancient Mesopotamia, there were the first tablet houses, which served as early schools. In the ancient Egypt, the elite were already educated in schools in reading, writing, arithmetics, and religion. And in the 5th century BC, in ancient Greece, school emerged. The Roman Empire had public schools in Rome in the 1st century. In the Islamic world, the madrasas started to appear during the 8th century. Those were prominent educational institutes providing religious studies, theology, literature, and law. The origin of compulsory education can be tracked back to the first industrial revolution. For centuries, one's position in society had been the decisive factor when it comes to receiving an education. Education has long been an affair of the elite. In numerous countries, this changed during the first industrial revolution that began around the 1750s. In England, the steam engine was invented, which allowed for faster production of textiles and iron through steam-powered machinery. This led to a migration from rural areas to the cities. People who were self-employed in rural areas became wage earners, and those who were previously self-sufficient became dependent on the industry they worked in. This transition, to say the least, was not smooth. And thus the idea of providing education for this segment of population emerged. After this first industrial revolution, as you may have guessed, came the second industrial revolution, around the 1850s to World War I actually. The textile and iron industry grew and other new industries emerged, and during this period, inventions such as telephone, the light bulb, and the internal combustion engine took place. This is also known as a technical revolution. As a result of several new communication tools, including computers, from the 1950s onward, it became possible to make information accessible worldwide. This marked the beginning of the third industrial revolution. And with the increasing role of computers, we can say that this is a digital revolution, characterized by communication, digitalization, and globalization, leading to a global scale expansion of companies. A new era emerged, the information society or service economy. Traditional industrial activities had benefited from these new developments, but the number of employees involved had decreased significantly. We are currently experiencing the fourth industrial revolution, in which robots and artificial intelligence play a major role. All these developments have directly or indirectly influenced the purpose of education, its content and/or its implementation. This started long before the Industrial Revolution. Since classical antiquity, there has been a desire for more broad yet deep education. However, in practice, this was accessible to almost nobody. There was some customization, primarily focused on the elite, and often on one-on-one private education. If you did not occupy a high position on the social ladder, you could, if you were lucky, also receive customized education. You would apprentice with someone in your village or city. For example, you might assist the blacksmith with the bellows and gradually learn the trade. The goal was clear. Depending on your background, you were prepared for your position in society through the blacksmith or a private tutor. Whether you were the son of a laborer or the son of a king, you had little influence over where you were sent or what you would learn. With the advent of industrialization, classrooms emerged. Sir Ken Robinson, in his lecture Changing Education Paradigms, painfully describes that our education is not only organized during this industrial revolution, but it's also organized itself in the interest of industrial revolution and according to industrial principles. Schools have many similarities to assembly lines in factories. The division into subjects, the bell that rings so you can move to the next subject, the teacher in front of the classroom. Sir Ken Robinson describes these groups of students as age-based badges, as if the most important thing children have in common is their date of manufacture. When Dutch children leave primary school, we even push them into a batch with the same cognitive level at the age of 11 or 12 already. I consider this a legacy from the past, pre-differentiating based on the expected position in society. And all of this to prepare children for a society in which we want to reduce such prejudices. This is because we know that the growth and development of children are highly dependent on the circumstances in which we place them. If you put someone in circumstances with low expectations, they will meet those expectations. This is not due to the learner, but because the guides set the bar low. This is a form of unconsciousness indoctrination that works better than we realize and causes problems in society at every level. You can imagine finding yourself in a specialized grammar school after primary school, then going to university and later become the Minister of Social Affairs. You haven't spoken to the people that your ministry supports to serve since you were 12 in the Netherlands, let alone worked with them, understood them, or had them understand you. Returning to the Industrial Revolution, the private tutor or craftsman was replaced by the master during this time. The educator, who was responsible for providing a broad basic knowledge level to everyone in the school. And this knowledge was initially intended to enable the masses to function better in an industrialized society. However, this also led to standardized curriculum. Over the years, the masters became teachers, and the responsibility in education gradually shifted from individual responsibility to responsibility for the classroom, which was invented during the Industrial Revolution, the badge. To this day, the class remains the central organizational unit in most schools. During the Third Industrial Revolution, the world became much smaller. With the emergence of telephone, computers, the internet, and later mobile internet, everyone has access to the largest knowledge bank in the world, the internet. A 6-year-old girl can now dance routines she learns online from someone on the other side of the planet. Anyone who wants to do a small home renovation searches for tips and clues online. As a result of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, many people now simply tell their phone or smart speaker at home to turn on the lights in the living room, and it happens automatically. As a teacher today, if you make a statement, your students can fact-check the information on their mobile phones and also find out if there are people worldwide who hold different opinions. Using all your knowledge to ask the right question to students, motivating them to seek answers, compare, and draw well-founded conclusions might become the most important way of transmitting knowledge. Getting these students curious. In the meantime, many teachers and students have proven that online knowledge sharing can work well if the motivation to participate is high enough. This was already evident before COVID. For example, in the autumn of 2011, 160,000 students from 190 countries participated in a massive open online learning course offered by Stanford University. Through the internet, we can collaborate regardless of location and time. We can invite specialists from around the world to join us online at specific moments so that we can learn from them. We can use software that caters to our needs. As a result, technology is playing an increasingly prominent role in our education. However, it's important technology doesn't become an end in itself. It should be seen as a tool that enables us to provide learners, both within and outside of education, with more personalized instruction than ever before. With that in mind, have a look at these game changers. I'm not calling them trends. A trend is too short-lived for me. What is stated here will have a continued, long-lasting impact on who we are, how we interact with each other around the world, and of course, how we interact with the world. Technology is experiencing a significant increase and will only continue to grow. There is a growing sense of urgency, particularly amongst young people who see that we are truly harming our planet. Environmental consciousness is increasing and will continue to increase. There is much more focus on social responsibility, both in terms of social well-being and global social actions. Of course, I also see new reports that suggest otherwise. But it is important to realize that good news often doesn't make it, or is only briefly covered in the news. Information overload is a significant challenge. The amount of information continues to grow, and thanks to developments in information technology, access to this information has become easier and faster. As a result, information stress is becoming more common. We collectively contribute to this information overload, so we must learn to choose wisely. We need to be aware that this happens consciously and unconsciously, and that we can and must train ourselves in dealing with this information overload. Globalization is evident. If you had come across the sign on the right 100 years ago, you may not have even heard of these places. Now, with a click on your phone, you can virtually be in one of these cities, or have a real-time video connection with someone on the other side of the world. When a ship gets stuck in the Suez Channel, we know and feel the impact, even in the smallest villages in the Netherlands, because our new couch will arrive 5 weeks later. For me, these are game changers. They influence who I am, how I behave, and how I do my job. Furthermore, they also impact what I want to educate for, how I do it, and what I expect from my students. Over the past 20 years, all of this has shifted for me. And it's not just for me. It also gradually affects the expectations that students and the business world have of and for an education. It influences what and how they want to learn. So my question to you is, how is this for you? For yourself? For the education that you are shaping? For your students? Do they have the same needs? And if you're doing nothing about this, and you're not addressing this, what does that mean for your students? What does that mean for their future? So I believe we are living in interesting times. Our knowledge about how we learn is greater than ever. Technology makes customization and collaboration easier than ever. I have good news. In my opinion, this can lead into something beautiful. Learning communities where knowledge transfer or technology is not at the center, but education that revolves around people, personal growth, and that can't be achieved on your own. Learning, growing is a social activity. The first human to stand upright must have had an external trigger or motivation, and everyone else took him as an example and learned from him. It's no longer about more or less technology, but about making conscious choices. It's about preparing for lifelong learners. How well do you teach your students to stay up to date? Up until now, I've been talking about external triggers for educational transformation, triggers from society. But we also know more and more about learning itself. For instance, about creating the ideal learning circumstances, the self-determination theory, or about how our brain functions. So let's have a look at one of many examples. An acquaintance of mine, Harold Beckering, is a Dutch professor of socio-cognitive neuropsychology. And I asked him about how people learn, and he answered that our brain is a prediction machine, with the function of minimizing surprises as much as possible. Our brains create models of everything we experience. And this way our brain predicts what is going to happen. If something is amiss in this prediction, the brain forms new connections, new brain connections. Therefore, learning is the process of creating new connections based on our failures. So the brain tries to avoid surprises. But if we want to train our brains, we must help the brain to build more models. And that works best by surprising our brain or the brain of our students. We need to put them in situations they don't expect. He did a research. He gave a group of people a joystick to control a spotlight on a screen. The challenge was to find and remember the objects. And when they found an object, they were given 5 seconds to remember it and then to find the next object. The control group also got a joystick, but they got a slightly different assignment. The spotlight was already moving, and they had to use the joystick to follow the spotlight. Then they also got the chance to memorize the objects for about 5 seconds. Let's call this control group the follower group, and the first group the find group. Well, the find group remembered 75% of the objects. The followers, not in control of their learning path, only remembered 60%. What if we would have known this before we invented schools in which teachers would lecture and students had to follow those lectures? Where we teach for the test, would we still have developed schools in the same way? This is just one scientific example, which hopefully inspires you to start thinking about approaching learning and also teaching in a different way. To conclude, I want to end with this quote: "Education isn't something you can finish." This sentence means education is an ongoing process. I am never done learning. My colleagues are never done learning. My students are never done learning. But it also means the way I provide or offer education can always be improved. It should be subjected to reflection, adjustment, and sometimes rebuilt from scratch based on new insights. And I must remain humble. As educators, we are mere passers-by during the lifelong journey that learners undertake. We have limited time to support and guide this process. It is not our process. It's the learner's process. It started a long time ago, and it will continue for the rest of their life. Thanks for listening.